Hi, I'm Julieann Hartman, and welcome to Heart to Heart. And today's guest is Dr. Carlos Piccini, and he's a very special man. He's been a very good friend of mine for a long time, and he's got so much information that I just had to share him with you. This is like my family out there. But let me tell you about Dr. Piccini. Okay, he does unique chiropractic work, but in addition to that, he helps people with other conditions from weight loss to health issues, through homeopathy, and through natural remedies, which I really think it's the way to go. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out.
My pleasure being here. Thanks very much for having me.
So, Dr. Piccini, what is it that you do? What's your background? Where'd you come from?
I've been a chiropractor for about 16 years now, and I think this is an interesting time in healthcare. One of the difficult problems with the medical community is that there's a tremendous amount of specialization. But in my practice, if somebody's got neck pain, I know most of the time that the problem is coming from somewhere else. So it's very important to try and take as holistic or a global view of the body as possible. I call my practice total relationship because I try and look at all the different dynamics and how they interact.
Okay, so it's not just the cracking of the spine, and you're looking at the total body.
Correct.
Okay, so today's show we're talking about gluten, and I know that right now, and for some reason, it's kind of like the disease of the century is this celiac disease and other autoimmune diseases could be because of gluten intolerance. So why don't we start here? Because I'm probably now speaking Spanish or speaking some of the language to most people. What is gluten? Exactly what is gluten?
Okay. Well, let me do one quick thing. I want to thank my mentor, Dr. Datis Karazian, who has done tremendous work in making a lot of this information available to practitioners so that it really gets out there. So I'm basing a lot of this on his work, although a lot of people have been very attentive to what's going on with gluten. The research and the things that he's put out recently have been really powerful. Now, in looking at this is a perfect example of what I'm saying is that gluten is a big problem, but it's not a problem on its own. A lot of times when you run panels and see if somebody is gluten sensitive, there are usually sensitivities in other parts of the body. So it's a very complex issue, and we have kind of a short amount of time. So, everybody who knows a lot about what I'm going to be talking about today, I want to be as simple and general as possible. So forgive me. But gluten, bottom line, it's coming from a Latin word glue. It's a combination of proteins. With wheat, you have wheat and you've got protein, and gluten is part of those proteins. Now let's talk about what foods. Wheat is probably the best known. Spelt, kamut, rye, barley. And here's where there's conflicting information, because some people will tell you that oats don't have gluten, but because of cross-contamination, there can be gluten sensitivities with oats. So if you're going to eat oats, if you're on a gluten-free diet, you really want to get 100% certified gluten-free. This is, as with most healthcare, things are very complicated, and one person says A, another person says B, and you're like, well, where do I go? So
that is a problem, because you feel like you've got a lot of information here and a lot of here. And so you just got to trust what God tells you inside to do.
And what feels right.
Right.
Yeah. And to complicate matters, there's a lot of hidden sources. Soy sauce, food starch, food emulsifiers, food stabilizers, artificial colors, malt extract. I mean, there's a lot of ways of getting gluten that if there's no wheat in it, but you're eating a product and that could still be in there. Now, obviously, that's a bigger issue for somebody who's really gluten sensitive.
When I noticed it when my kids were in elementary school, there were a lot of kids that had this gluten sensitivity. And I mean bad, they would go into some kind of, is it anaphylactic shock or something, where they'd have to get the EpiPen.
Yeah, I mean that's in a real bad case.
Yeah, but I don't think those cases were around when you and I were in school.
Well, we can talk about that right now. One of the things that researchers looked at is there really more gluten sensitivity, or is it just because now we can test for it, we have a better idea of whether it's there? And they did a very interesting study. They used remaining blood samples from healthy Air Force personnel from the 40s and 50s that they had retained, compared those to over 9,000 current Air Force personnel, and they found that where there was 1 in 700 of an undetected celiac, now it's 1 in 100. So it's definitely a condition that is growing. It is becoming a bigger problem.
Wow. So now, is it the DNA of us? I mean, like, how did that change? Like, what's help, Carlos? What happened? What happened? What is our parents doing to us?
Well, let's not blame them.
No, I know. But so let's talk about the gluten sensitivities. Like, give me some sensitivity problems that someone would have.
Okay. Symptom-wise, and this is what's scary about this, is that, people would not necessarily connect the two. Mm-hmm. They may or may not be connected. I mean, again, this is where the situation gets very complicated to figure these things out. But intestinal problems, osteoporosis, thyroid issues, fatigue, depression, brain degeneration, conditions like Alzheimer's and things like that, ADHD, migraine, obesity, reproductive problems, and links to cancer. Now, you can have 5 other topics that probably all have those lists of things.
Exactly.
But, this is an important factor that, unfortunately, now can be tested for.
Well, okay, so then what is that test? Is that the old stool sample?
No, there's some new... we should probably pause on this and talk about this a little bit, because let's just say that when the body eats wheat, it breaks out into a lot of components. And I could get into the specifics, but it would probably bore you. But what happens when there's a sensitivity is that the body starts creating antibodies. And this is a blood test that shows a sensitivity or reactivity. And there's a new company, Cyrex, which 2 days ago launched a gluten sensitivity panel that they've put together that measures over 22 possible sensitivities. Where before there was, one benchmark, there was a DNA test, an HLA test for genes, and in gluten itself, there's 4 different types: alpha, beta, gamma, and omega, and they were only testing omega. And as I said, with 22 different possible tests, they were only looking at 2 things when there were a myriad of other problems that could have been contributing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, there's so much to learn from this. Now, so what do you do when someone comes to you and says, hey, I've had all these chronic issues? I mean, is that probably one of the first, little neon sign, gluten, that might be the problem with them?
Yeah, diet in general, because unfortunately with the American diet, with the with the cost of food, the availability of fast food, of processed food, of microwaves, a good percentage of the population really doesn't make healthy choices. So it's always a big part of it. But what's interesting is that there's a complicating factor. Some people, you pull them off gluten, and for the first 3 days to first few weeks, they can actually feel worse. Because there's oddly enough, there is some brain chemistry mimicking that goes on with gluten that people go off it and they feel like they're detoxing, and they are. The same if you go off of coffee or other things like that. So
you're saying that there's like a deception going on where your body thinks it's something else, but it's really the gluten?
Well, it's missing the gluten, so to speak.
Oh, okay, I see.
So there's a detox reaction that can occur, because the bulk of the population will feel better when they go on a gluten-free diet, but there's a certain percentage of the population that actually feels worse when they first get off, before they get over that detox phase, so to speak.
Well, I will tell you that I've been noticing now there's a lot of restaurants, and even very nice restaurants, that have a gluten-free menu, which I'm surprised at. I was actually in Canada over the summer, and we were at a very, high-end restaurant, and they brought out this gluten menu, and I was like, well, that is great, because, you start getting limited on where you can go. My husband loves to go out and eat in restaurants.
Right.
And not a lot of people not a lot of those restaurants have the gluten-free, so you're like, I'll take this, I'll take that. So now, what food is like our most common food that does have the gluten in it?
Well, wheat is probably the big number one thing that we're exposed to.
Okay, so you're talking about the bread, but you're talking about wheat in a lot of things. There's crackers, there's bread.
Crackers, even if
cereal.
You had a piece of breaded fish, fried fish is going to have bread in it. But I had an interesting thing. I was in Trader Joe's last night, and I was looking at some food, and this girl pulled up, she was 10 years old, she pulled up a product, and she said, oh, there's no G on it, which Trader Joe's has a G for gluten-free, and she put it back, and I started talking to her about how educated she was, and of course she's been much better since she's been off the gluten. But it's important to keep in mind that there are different degrees. I mean, with full-blown celiac, and maybe we can talk about that some other time, is a very serious condition. Those people, it's very obvious to them.
Right.
But to the average person, they might not know, because when you talk about going to a restaurant, there could be a sauce or something in the food that you have no idea that you're getting gluten. Now, if you have full-blown celiac disease, you're going to be very aware of that.
Right.
If you have a little bit of sensitivity, you could probably get away with it.
Right, but then you would maybe not feel good the next day or within a couple hours.
And may make no connection as to where it came from. You might blame it on bad food. You might blame it on a cold. It could, it would be very difficult to figure out exactly where it came
Now,
from.
is there anything that you can do to prevent this, or that you can do once you have the sensitivity, besides staying away from those foods?
Well, I mean, people with full-blown celiac, a lot of times when you are armed with the information of knowing where your sensitivities are and potential other autoimmune conditions that you're experiencing, you can do a lot to really dampen an immune reaction. And there are also really good products, if you are gluten sensitive, that can help put the fire out if you have an accidental exposure.
Oh, okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we've got a lot more to share, so we're going to do that with part 2. So,
right.
So I'm going to cut you off right now so we can get into part 2 of this. And we do have our foundation scripture every time we do a show.
Okay.
And today I'm going to have Carlos read it, and this is Genesis 1:29. It's right there.
My glasses, thank you, man. And God said, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food."
Oh, see, that's awesome. And that's what I do love about, especially like with a diet that I have. God gave us the herbs and the plants and the stuff for us to eat here on this earth, but we got so involved with all the processed stuff that's when I think the DNA started changing in our bodies. I don't know if that's true, but that's just my opinion on it. But well, thank you for coming on. We're going to do part 2, so stay tuned. You'll see this show the following on Friday. And from my heart to yours, this is Julieann Hartman and Dr. Carlos Pacini, and we will see you soon.